It takes a pretty thick skin to surf Twitter these days, and I know it's not Twitter anymore, it's X, but you know what I mean. Dumb memes, dumber political rants, and occasionally you see a tweet that makes you stick with the platform. For me, those tweets often come from Eric Alper, or as he goes by on Twitter, that Eric Alper. I've been following Eric for a while now. He's a PR specialist who works in the music industry, and I'd say he's a musicologist. Is that a phrase? It should be, if it isn't. He shares his love of music on social media all the time. He's perfectly apolitical, certainly curious, and eager to have conversations about what you love about pop culture. How could you resist that? And how could you resist tweets like this? What's a great underrated album that seems like only you love? Or Lenny and the Squig Tones were underrated. I love that one. And maybe it's showing my age, but it's still very funny. Or how about this tweet? What's a song with one of the coolest bass lines of all time? I mean, how could you not want to interact with these tweets? But that's Eric Alper. He's an upbeat guy who just loves to love music. And since we all need a break from 24/7 politics, I hate to break it to you, but the 2024 election cycle is just around the corner. I thought I'd invite him on Hollywood and Toto to talk more about music, how he got into this curious part of the industry, and much more. And he did not disappoint. Now, I guarantee this bonus episode is going to go by in a flash. And if you don't follow Eric immediately after the show wraps on Twitter, I will be shocked, truly. Thank you for joining the show, Eric. Now, you describe yourself as a lifelong musicaholic, which I think is a funny term. So that triggers to me that something set things in motion, an album, a band, a song, a moment. Now, for me, I'm not you at all, but for me, the band was the Monkees when I was a kid. I just loved their music.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That was my entry point. But let's talk about you and what made you into the person you are today. Because I'm just guessing, but...
Yeah, isn't that amazing that you and I are talking today and like on this day in history?
Oh yeah,
that the Monkees TV series aired. Yeah, it was a moment. It was I was 8 years old, and up at the cottage we had a local movie theater, and my parents went to go see whatever film that they were going to go see, and I went by myself to go see this movie called American Hot Wax.
Oh wow!
And when you're 8, you can do those things in a small town in a cottage. And it told the story of the DJ Alan Freed, who, for people who may not be aware, was one of the first rock and roll DJs and certainly one of the first to coin the term rock and roll. And I didn't really know a lot about it, but it looked really fascinating to me. And I was, I bought my Donny Osmond albums. I bought all the K-Tel albums, or at least I had them bought for me when I begged and pleaded for them. But right there on the screen, it was a fictional story, kind of like a docudrama. But at the end, it all cumulated into a concert of the real life Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis on stage. And for people that see Star Wars as a kid and have a lifelong love of sci-fi, that was my Star Wars. It was seeing these strange creatures blow the roof off of something, and I said, that's what I want to do. I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea how to even get started doing anything remotely to become friends with Jerry Lee Lewis or Chuck Berry, but that's what I want to do. And I just stood there wide eyes in the entire movie. While, and weirdly enough, I got to do PR for Chuck Berry and Jerry Lee Lewis, and did an interview with the writer of American Hot Wax later on. But that kind of led the whole life of, I want to find out everything I need to know. And so I got a subscription to Billboard magazine when I was 12. And it wasn't just like memorizing the charts or writing down the chart numbers. For me, it was all about the stories. It was about who this manager was, what this record label did, why this artist got dropped, why certain songs worked and sometimes they didn't. And the more that I got into it, the more I loved it. And of course, the realization that I just sucked at every instrument possible. I stunk at the drums. I faked my way through band class and trumpet, doing that, like literally with my mouth, not knowing how to play anything. I still stink. You stick me in a studio, I would not know a single thing of what to do. And but I love the behind the scenes stuff. I love working with artists and telling their stories and figuring out how the media operates on every side, why certain stories are getting written, why some aren't, why certain, why nothing sticks anymore in this world of, huge, massive stories that get no single play after 24 or 48 hours when it used to take 3 weeks for a death in the music world to get through North America
Mhm.
in the days of Rolling Stone. Like, well, when Jim Morrison died, it took him 3 weeks for most of the people that worked with him to know that he had died in Paris while they were working in America. There was just no high speed anything. So that's what really attracted me, and it all began back in 1978 watching that film.
It's funny, when I think about music, I think about the songs, the lyrics, and the stories within them, which are so captivating and we love so much. But you're equally enamored with the stories behind the stories. That's fascinating. So, I was
Yeah,
going to
and,
ask.
and it's also because a lot of the lyrics have absolutely nothing to do with you and I. Like, if you were to know the absolute boredom and insignificance of some of the greatest songs that you and I would put a lot of emphasis on, it would disappoint you to no end.
Can
But
you?
because they write these songs in complete isolation away from everybody and then release them and then have 50,000 people at a concert sing those lyrics back to them with their own moments and their own memories attached to it. That's what I want to know. I want to know the psychology. I want to know how the brain works. I want to know all those things that make people all collectively figure out this is a good song.
Mhm.
That is a bad song. And sometimes that bad song has absolutely nothing to do with it being a bad song. A lot of it just has to do with wrong song, right place, right people. It's like I tell people all the time, it's like when you're watching a movie and you see the 900 people in the credits, every one of those people had the opportunity to completely screw up this film. And it's a miracle that anything works in the arts. And music is the same way. You have to have every country, every promotion staff, every A&R, the right video, the right radio. That DJ in some small town, Ohio, in the middle of the night, deciding to flip over a B-side of Rod Stewart in 1972, and up comes Maggie May. That stuff happens by chance. And those are the kind of moments that I love to know because it goes against the grain of all of these so-called experts that know how to make a hit record or a hit film or write a hit novel. Nobody knows.
Yeah, there's a famous quote. I think it was William Goldman, the screenwriter, talked about Hollywood. He says, basically, no one knows anything in Hollywood. The same could be applied to the music industry. But you're in a way behind the scenes. You're in the belly of the beast in a way that many people aren't. When you entered that realm, was there anything maybe disappointing? It's almost like pulling the curtain back on Oz, where you say, well, it actually is a lot of drudge work. It's a lot of dull moments. It's a lot of downtime between the highlights. Was there sort of an awakening there, or did you just love every part of it, and even the quiet moments have a magic to you?
Without losing without losing every single person of the audience. The major label versus staying indie man
Mhm.
rule did certainly was not true at all. There was always talk about the big bad record labels of Universal or Sony or Warner, like all they care about is just money. I've seen more corruption at the independent level of
Wow.
the small time, people who claim that they are only in it for the music are some of the worst business people. And on both sides, every company is literally just out to make as much money and exploit the artist as humanly possible. And the game is 100% rigged against the artist in every opportunity for every contract. That's what shocked me, but it still surprised me that there would still be a lineup halfway down the block to all the artists who continue to want to sign with any record label.
That's so
Because
interesting.
that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Like you wanna you wanna you want to break it in Hollywood, you got to move to Hollywood. You want to break in New York, you got to move to New York, if or Toronto or London, England. But But the last couple of years has certainly shown people that you can actually be a success bypassing those traditional gatekeepers of record labels and radio and TV and talk shows and commercial media. You can bypass all of that and just go direct to the fans and post something on Instagram. Look, you have all these artists like a Taylor Swift or Selena Gomez or Lil Nas X, who I know that you've written about recently. They don't need publicists per se in the traditional sense. They can post something on their Instagram and reach 450 million people, which is more than every other talk show in America put together.
Yeah,
So they get to control the image of way more than they did in the past.
that's so true. But also, I think it takes a while to get to that level, of fame where they have more control. This kind of, I wanted to ask you about this later, but let's bring it up right now. You've got singers like Oliver Anthony, the rapper Tom McDonald, Buddy Brown is a country western star who claims he went to Nashville. They wanted to control him too much. He said, thanks, no thanks, and went indie. And they're all having these mini success stories. Now, obviously, they're the exception, not the rule, but they're becoming more common. Is that
becoming more?
Do you think if we're talking again in 10 years that we'll see a lot more of those artists? Will they still remain the exception, that you still need the machinery of the record industry?
I hope that there will be more and more, but the problem is that the major labels simply just do not want anybody independent to have any piece of the marketing pie. It's amazing to see Oliver Anthony music come along and be absolutely so naive to where he's playing in that it's almost beautiful in a way, but it's harmful to him and others. Not even 4 hours before we were taping this, news broke that he had to cancel a show because he realized that ticket prices were $90 and he wanted to keep them at $25. Which is great. Which is a great thing to want to be. I want to keep my ticket prices low. I don't want to work with Ticketmaster or a third party site that has exorbitant fees. But the fact is, though, that he signed the deal for $125,000 to play that show. The venue holds 1,500 people. You have to charge $90 for a ticket in order for the venue to break even. He actually apologized and said, I'm just figuring this out.
Sure.
So I think once you start to play in a level where you can be a millionaire by the end of the month, he probably is close to it as anybody else. The ability to realize that there's a lot of rules in place and you better figure it out, because the minute that you take 3 days to read over a contract, there's already like 60,000 people on Spotify that already have 1 million views and streams that are trying to goose step over you. So I think it's certainly, look, when you are a 16-year-old right now and you want to be a pop singer in the way of like a Billie Eilish, or you discover Kurt Cobain and Nirvana for the first time, there's something about them now that they don't want to tour America. They don't want to go overseas to London, England, and walk across Abbey Road. They want 9 million followers on TikTok. They want the influencer money to come in. So it's just a different way to look at things now. They have no interest in winning a Grammy Award. These kids that are coming up, zero. They're not even watching the shows. It's meaningless to them because they understand trophies maybe don't matter in the long run, or that every kid got a participation trophy, or that their favorite artist isn't even showing up to accept these awards. So when they see other people that are becoming their heroes or their heroines, they have different levels of success. So when you ask me, does it mean more and more artists will kind of bypass that system? Absolutely. I mean, right now there's 130,000 songs that are being uploaded on Spotify each and every day. Maybe 70 of them are going to get on the radio. Maybe 8 of them we're going to remember a year from now. And maybe 1 of them we're going to listen to, a decade from now. I mean, the stakes are so high because the money is so big. And the competition is so fierce.
Yeah, it's sobering too. You've worked with so many big names in the industry. Obviously, I mentioned them in the introduction. Do they have something in common? I mean, listen, you could have different genres of music, different styles, different age demographics, but is there something that the greats have in common that you've noticed through your work along the way?
Yeah, what's interesting is like they didn't have a plan B. They all slept on floors, while they were touring. They all lived, if you were from the UK, they all lived on beans on toast, is what they'll
Yeah.
call it, instead of like Kraft dinner or macaroni and cheese. They had no other options in their life. It was either the unemployment line or that they made 55 cents playing to the bartender and their dog at a show. And they loved it because every opportunity that every day that they didn't have to go and do a job that they didn't want to do, they won in their eyes. And that's kind of my attitude with it, was reading about people in Rolling Stone and Billboard and Cream and Mojo and Q and all these magazines and newspapers when I was growing up. Even a lot still to this day, so many of them just broke the system by not having very wealthy parents, although a lot of them quite did.
Mhm.
The Clash were pretty middle class. Like, they didn't really suffer, as much as people may think that they did. Or Taylor Swift, a lot of talent, but she also had a very wealthy family that allowed her to go and buy a bus so they can go visit 350 radio stations across America. But for the most part, almost to a T, it was an absolute laser focus that they wanted to just kill.
Yeah.
They wanted to, and when they made the charts at number 78, they hated everybody else that was 1 through 77. Even if they were friends, they were
Yeah.
looking at them going, why does he have a bigger pool? Mick Jagger, still to this day, I will almost guarantee you, will still look at Ed Sheeran's home and said, how come Ed Sheeran has 4 pools and I only have 3?
It's amazing, but I think that hunger and passion is addictive,
Yeah.
and I think it translates. And that's one of the many, many reasons why we love the musicians, because we sense that within them, maybe even if they lose that over the years, because it's impossible to keep those fires lit. I've been thinking a lot about Taylor Swift, and I'm trying to wrap my brain about her fame, this tour, selling movie tickets like nobody's business. You're the perfect person to talk to about her. Bigger than the Beatles, better than Michael Jackson, not quite the same. How do we categorize her at this point? Because it just, I can't remember someone being this famous, this powerful, this at the peak of their powers, quite like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is that I was around for the Michael Jackson's Thriller. I was pinpoint exactly the right age when that album came out. So I was 13 years old. I have never to this day seen anything like the sheer power of one person, mostly because we were all watching the 4 television channels and reading the 3 magazines. And there was no internet. There, like, if anybody hated Michael Jackson, you had to hear somebody literally saying that. You didn't have to read it halfway around the world. So in my little world, 40 million people buying Thriller was the entire planet. So yeah, you can easily put Taylor Swift in that category, only because she's been able to do, in a very decisive and divided world where we're all not watching the same things and reading the same things and listening to the same things, the ability for her to grab all of our attention with every move that she makes might be what the Beatles were able to do, but there were 4 of them
Yeah,
and
yeah.
only one Taylor. But when Michael Jackson was able to get African American artists on MTV and put funk and soul and R&B music onto commercial radio, Taylor Swift has been able to do 7, 8 dozen different things in her career that literally changed music, where it's holding back her music on Spotify and trying to get a better deal, or the thing with iTunes and taking her music off, to making, videos and charging way more money than I think anybody even thought possible. I mean, she's going to not just crack the $1 billion grossing for her tour. And nobody's been able to do that. Elton John's come close. He retired a couple of months ago at $930 million for his tour. She's not only going to crack 1 billion, she actually might do 2 billion by the time that this is all said and done with. But she's just done everything right in the last 4.5, 5 years, starting off with getting so unbelievably shafted by not owning the master recording and saying, I'm going to just re-record, because other artists have done that. I've actually worked and done PR for artists that have gone back in the studio and re-recorded their music so that the television commercial, the Burger Kings want to use that song. Well, they'll get a cheaper rate if they use that version of the new version rather than the original version. But Taylor Swift has actually made it economic viable for the fans to get involved with this. Normally, lookalike and soundalikes for decades were only used for cheap compilations when they didn't want to pay the original rights holder for it. She's actually made it a commercial entity for people to rebuy something, which it's kind of funny because like the music industry was so great at this. Here's the vinyl record, and then 10 years later, here's the 8-track. Go buy that. And then here's the cassette. And here's this new shiny thing about CDs. And then everybody threw out their CDs. And then it was kind of like, hey, remember that vinyl record? Here it is in like a 4 CD L4 LP box. And so the music industry was known and great for repackaging. She's done the same thing with a twist that is, it's kind of wild to think about just how powerful she really is.
Yeah, and she's 33. She's a baby, so she's got a lot more
33.
work ahead of her. One of the reasons why we're talking today is because
And
go ahead.
and one thing, we really know nothing about her. Like
Mhm.
that's the fascinating thing about all of this, and this kind of goes back to what you and I we were talking about before. With you know, everybody has the ability to shape their own narrative on social media. We really don't know anything except for what she's told us.
Yeah, and also who she's dating. We feast on that
Yeah,
news, and we don't even know
yeah,
all the
we
details
always
about
did
that
though.
either.
Yeah, we did that about
Mm.
Mick Jagger and Warren
Yeah,
Beatty
yeah.
in the 70s and 80s though.
Sure. Obviously, I follow you on Twitter, and I love your Twitter feed. It's upbeat, it's provocative, it stirs my nostalgia circuits like few Twitter feeds do, or X feeds, I should say. Tell me how you develop that voice, because it's I understand it takes work, and also it's so complete, and like a writer develops his or her voice. I feel like on social media it takes a while to get the reps, to get a sense of who you really are. How did you develop that?
I tweet the exact same way as what I did when I first logged on 14 years ago. It was just a chance to purge all the fun things that
Mhm.
I read about and that I see and that I find, and I rarely give my opinion on anything. I mean, I'll celebrate things all day long, and with birthdays or anniversaries, or talking about this album hitting number one on this day or this music news. But I learned from watching others absolutely destroy their lives that nobody cares about my opinion.
Mhm.
I mean, it's nice to know, and it's not that I'm hiding anything. It's just that I don't like certain things as much as anybody else does, but I don't have to share them with the
Sure.
world. And it's not about me. The question that all those silly, goofy questions that I ask, it's really, I'm not data scraping. I'm not looking for information on where people live. All of it is just by the fact that I'm curious to know what people are listening to,
Yeah.
and that I find so much more music, especially new music and old stuff that I might have missed, just from people answering. And it's just a basic human psychological moment. Everybody likes talking about themselves. And so really early on, it was really just nothing more. And then it just kind of exploded from there. But it wasn't anything, and it does take work. It's like an hour and a half a day for me to set up my day each and every day, and I'm on there just checking it out every so often, and or or posting breaking news. But most of the time, though, it's really just celebrating and talking about the being being the one being the one corner of Twitter where you don't really have to fight with anybody if you don't want to.
You could put your gloves
I'll
down.
Yeah, you can put your glove down for a little bit. I'll post about Nickelback because I know them. They're
Gloves
the
back on.
nicest, sweetest guys in the they're the nice, sweetest guys in the world. I'll post about them. I don't care if anybody else doesn't like them. It's my thread. I'll
Yeah.
I'll go and post about stuff. But it's sometimes okay, look, I'll give you an example. It's the when I post about somebody like Oliver, or when I post about let's say who's kind of who's kind of like really
Like a Jason Aldean prop, maybe?
Yeah, or Zach Bryan, or Morgan Wallen is a perfect example. So Morgan Wallen is breaking music records all over the place. Most album sales in a certain period of time, longest running solo Billboard #1 hit in history, sold 12 million albums. It's okay to talk about him in those contexts without declaring that he's the next Hitler or he's the next, bad guy.
Yeah.
Because I understand where he's coming from. I see him. I know who he is. I get the apology. I get radio banning him. But the minute that radio stops banning somebody like Morgan Wallen, it sends a signal to everybody in the world that whatever he did, it's now okay.
Yeah.
He's forgiven. And even when all that stuff was going on, I know it's painful. I know that even with me posting about Pink Floyd, knowing what Roger Waters had said about Jewish people, I get it. But you can't deny certain facts about what is going on in the world without trying to insert your own personal opinion and view into the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
I can talk about stuff all day long, but again, just I don't want it to be that place.
Spoiler alert, some rock stars have behaved badly over the years, and then we have to get over that. Eric, before I let you go, you've interviewed so many people, you've worked with so many people. I hope I'm using this phrase correctly. Who's your great white whale, the one musician you just haven't had the chance to talk to interview, but you're dying to do just that?
I've never been in the same room with Paul McCartney, and I'm not so sure what I would say. Because I've worked with Ringo Starr, and that was cool. And I've worked with some of my most loved artists. I can't tell you how many artists I've worked with that I bought their albums with my own money when I was a kid. Working with Sinead O'Connor was amazing. Working with Jerry Lee Lewis, I thought he was going to shoot me, but then I thought he was going to shoot anybody. But Paul McCartney would be the guy. You ever see that SNL skit where Chris Farley was with Paul and he was like, "You were in the Beatles?" And Paul was like, "Yes, I was." That would be me. It would be like, "Hey, you know that you were in the Beatles," because I don't know what I would. This is a guy that I've thought about at least once a day in any moment. And I've read certainly more about him, I think, than any other person. And I'm not a huge obsessive fan. It's just that it's the Beatles. So when you're a music fan, they have to be, up there. And because I just consume a lot, it's just,
Well, it's like Mount Rushmore in America. It's
Mount Rushmore. It would be like, that I would know more about you than you do. And I don't know why I would want to be in the same room with him, but I think it would he's one guy that I could always think of that it'll never happen.
Well, it's funny, Eric, I think what you're connecting with, either with Twitter or your SiriusXM show, is that you still have that within you. That's you're still the fan who gets the goosebumps, who thinks about a Paul McCartney and doesn't, after years of interviews, would still stumble and stammer because of that connection.
Nobody's more amazed that I'm still here, Chris, than I am.
Well, I'm so glad we got you on the show. Of course, you have to visit thatericalper.com to find out more about his work, his media relations gigs, and also just read his excellent music blog. But you also have to follow him on X. I know it's Twitter, but we'll call it X because that's what Elon wants. Of course, it's at that Eric Alper. And I like brand consistency. I've got it here and you've got it there as well. But Eric, we need more positive voices on social media and more fun and more nostalgia and more love of the arts. And you bring all that to the table. So thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I truly appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Another bonus episode is in the can. Thank you for listening. If you have any feedback, good, bad, excruciating, I've got a pretty thick skin at this point, please send me a note, christian@hollywoodintoto.com. Now, go find an old album you used to love years and years ago and give it a fresh listen. I think Eric would love that, and I would too.